welcome to the Wargame Explorer. My name is Rob Wells, and I appreciate you coming to visit my website, the Wargame Explorer, or if you're on YouTube, visiting the Wargame Explorer. I wanted to give a brief history of how I got into wargaming and what led me to where I am now, where I have an entire website devoted to miniature wargaming. So it starts with an article in the Cub Scout magazine Boy's Life, and I was probably 8 years old, and it was an article in the magazine that was about model railroading, and I just read this model railroading article over and over, and I fell in love with miniatures, and I started to branch out as we got older. My brother and I would go around 2 blocks. There was a little store, there's a tiny store that's smaller than this room, called Comics Utah, and they sold comics and they sold miniatures. And I didn't know anything about Games Workshop. I didn't know anything about what the games were, but they had this one model that was a catapult that launched goblins. And I thought, this is the coolest thing I have ever seen. And I knew that I had to get into this. Then I saved up more money, and this is, Games Workshop stuff was more affordable back then. But I saved up my money, and I bought a box of skeletons. And those were phenomenal for me because I realized that I could paint them and they would look relatively good because all you needed to do was paint them black and then dry brush on white. And I, at 10, 11 years old, I could figure out dry brushing. And I just fell in love with it, but I didn't know anything about the game. I never even considered that there was a game. I thought that this was just like model railroading. It was miniatures for miniature's sake. And I didn't understand that there was a game involved. And it wasn't until I was in the 8th grade, I had a friend, his name was Giles. He and I were sitting next to each other in Spanish class, and he pulls out this book, and he's flipping through it, and it just looks so cool to me. And I ask him what it is, because there's Space Marines on it. And I kind of had seen Space Marines, but I didn't know what they were. And it was the original first edition compendium, which is a collection of White Dwarf articles that they crammed all together. But it was the book that had the original Harlequin rules. It's the book that had the original SWAT rules, the original Imperial Guard rules, the original Dreadnought rules. It had all of this stuff from first edition, and I asked him if he played the game. I asked him a little bit about what the game was, and I said, well, do you play it on a board? And he said, no, you can play it on the floor of this whole room, and you could go 10 feet this way and 10 feet that way, and that just boggled my mind, that you measured with a measuring tape instead of measuring with squares on a board. But he said, I'm getting rid of this book. I'll give it to you for $15. So I gathered $15 from somewhere. I didn't have a job. I was in 8th grade. But I gathered $15. I bought the book from him. And from then on, I was hooked. My brother had a friend who had an orc army, and I bought a Harlequin army. I remember going into the store, and I was going to buy an army, and I didn't know what army I was going to buy, but I had saved up $30, and this is $30 probably 1992 money, 1993 money, and I wanted an army, and there was one box of Harlequins. And Harlequins are such an expensive point cost that one box of Harlequins is an entire army. And the guy at the desk explained this to me. And so I'm like, yes, Harlequins it is. So that was my first army, was Harlequins. And I painted them terribly. At this point, I was still using paint from painting model cars. So it was the Tester's enamel paint. I've got them right here. These are the original paints that I used. I found them in my dad's basement. This Tester's gloss enamel, it just globbed on. They looked horrible. I wish I knew where they were. I have no clue where those Harlequins ended up. But I would play with my brother's friend, and he would be the orcs, and I would be the Harlequins, and we played and we played, and then I discovered squats, and they were in my book. They were in the compendium, and I said, I need to get some squats because this is the coolest thing I've ever seen. Dwarves riding trikes. And I knew that I needed squats. And so I saved up my $30 and I bought a box of plastic squats. The Harlequins are all metal. These were plastic squats that came in a kit. And I put them together carefully. These are the first ones where I bought a 9-pot paint set from Citadel, so I had the actual paints. By this point, I was probably a junior or a senior in high school, and painting this and loving it. Fast forward about 2 or 3 years, four years probably. My brother is married. I am single. And I decide that I want to invest in a whole army. Now we're in 3rd edition. And I want to go chaos. And so I start saving money, and I save up $200. And it was still mail order. They didn't have a website. This was probably the year 1999, probably. And you didn't order on a website. And I saved up my $200 and I bought a giant box. And I remember it coming in the mail, this giant box that said Games Workshop on it, and being thrilled to have this enormous army. And that was my New Year, new army, was this giant box of chaos. And I painted them and I loved them, and I was just so deep into it. A game that I got really into, that I built terrain for, and that I built models for and played all the time, and played solo all the time, because a lot of the time I had trouble finding people to play with. My brother would play with me sometimes, but I was having trouble finding anyone to play with. And but it was Inquisitor, and I loved Inquisitor. I loved the role-playing aspect of it. I loved all the random charts that happened. I just loved all the detailed stuff about getting hit in the arm versus getting hit in the leg. That all really intrigued me. But then a terrible thing happened, which is that my brother had a kid. I got married. My brother had a kid. And the day his kid learned to walk was the last day that my brother and I played Warhammer 40K for about 12 years. I remember the day distinctly. It was Memorial Day. We had gone up the canyon to a hotel with the whole family, and my brother had brought his Space Wolves, and I had brought my Chaos, and or I think at that point I was playing Imperial Guard. I've gone through so many different armies. And his daughter was tall enough that she could reach the table, and she would pull the models off and start putting them in her mouth. And we would move the models in so she couldn't do it. And the game was just impossible with this kid. And from then on, everything went in boxes. and different hobbies took over, and that was the end of miniatures for me. And then I fell back into wargaming when I got a new job that paid really well. It was exactly when 8th edition came out. 8th edition came out just by chance, the time where I got this job where I had a lot of money, and I was thinking, my son is now about the right age where he ought to be getting in miniatures. Why don't I get him some Space Marines for Christmas? I'll have to get myself some stuff for Christmas. And I ended up diving back into it so hard. Now, let me tell you something about myself, which I don't hide. If you want to watch another video about me, I have mental illness. I have schizophrenia and I have OCD. And with this job that paid me so well, I could buy all the models that I wanted to. And not in a healthy way. And I started to buy so many models. And I bought them, and I never put them together. I never did anything with them. I just bought them and bought them and bought them. And this wasn't a pile of shame thing. This was an unmedicated OCD thing. And it got bad, and I ended up selling everything in an effort to try to get control of my mental capacity. But I still loved wargaming. And then it wasn't until 2019, and there was an ad that I saw for Bolt Action online, and Father's Day was coming up, and my wife asked me what I wanted for Father's Day. And she's like, do you want some models? Do you want some paints? Because I also paint pictures. And I said, I want this Bolt Action. And I dove into Bolt Action and got really into it and fell in love with the game mechanics and how Bolt Action worked, and realized that there was this whole world of wargaming that wasn't Games Workshop. And that was just a revelation to me. I mean, I always knew that there was wargaming that wasn't Games Workshop, but this was a big deal. And so I got into Bolt Action. I then got into Conflict 47. And then I got back into Warhammer. I got back into painting everything. I got into dioramas really big. I wanted to do something with the pandemic was on, so I couldn't play Bolt Action with anybody, but I wanted to display my models. So I would build these elaborate dioramas. I'll show pictures of them here on the screen for you. Elaborate dioramas of one is North Africa and one is Normandy, and just to display my Bolt Action models. And the pandemic continued to rage. I painted more models. And then it was in May of 2021. And I said, this is a passion of mine. I have been involved in this hobby for so long. I want to write about it. I'm also a writer. I'm a novelist. I have 15 books out. I'm a New York Times best-selling novelist. And I said, I want to write about it. And so that's what the Wargame Explorer is. I had started this YouTube channel called Robinson Wells Hobby Terrain when I thought that it was going to just be about making these dioramas. And I changed the channel to be the Wargame Explorer. And then I started this website, the Wargame Explorer, and it is growing like crazy, and I cannot believe how well it is being received and how many people are coming and visiting. And so I welcome all of you here. Thank you so much. there are more cool things coming. I want you to know what is coming down the line. First thing coming down the line is that in about 10 days, this website is going to have a totally new look because I've hired a designer who is going to redo the website for me, and I'm really excited for that. Second thing is there are going to be more videos. They're going to be better produced than this. This is just me throwing this together on a Tuesday afternoon. And in the third quarter of this year, I plan on launching a game system. And it is going to be obviously small scale. It's going to be miniatures agnostic, but it's going to be highly encouraged that you kit bash. You don't have to kit bash, but it's going to be highly encouraged that you do. It's going to be a game that you can play with as little as 3 or 4 models. But it will be something that I'm really excited about, something fun that you can play in 45 minutes a game and maybe play 3 games in an evening. And I'm really looking forward to that. That's going to come out in the third quarter of this year. And so you'll see a lot more about that on this site. Anyway, thank you guys for watching this. Thank you for coming to the website. And I will see you next time.